The great ships arrived without a sound. They did not burn through the sky. They simply appeared, vast and silent. Their hulls were the color of a starless night. They hung in your orbit like patient gods. You sent messages of peace and of warning. You sent questions in every language you had ever known. There was never any reply. The silence was their true introduction. They came not to conquer your world. They came to catalog it. They were not warriors. They were librarians. This was somehow more terrifying. An invader you can fight. An invader has a motive you can understand. But these beings, these sky openers, were beyond that. They treated your entire existence as a book to be placed on a shelf. Your wars and your loves were just data. Their ships had no visible engines. They moved by what seemed to be sheer disapproval of their previous location. Gigantic scanners descended from their dark bellies. They bathed continents in a soft, blue light. The light missed nothing. It saw every blade of grass. It saw every secret you kept in your heart. You felt the scan as a faint hum in your bones. It was the sound of being read. You watched them scan your cities and your minds. They recorded your art and your history. They copied your digital networks in a single afternoon. It had taken you a century to build them. They mapped your entire genome in under an hour. You had spent decades on that project. You still argued about the last 2%. They did not seem to care about the argument. Your world was given a number. Specimen 734. That was your new name. All of humanity, all of its dreams and its fury, all of it was filed under a designation. It was neat and tidy. It was an insult colder than any weapon. You were no longer a people. You were an entry in a vast and silent index, a footnote in a book you were not allowed to read. You had no defenses against this. You could not fight a beam of analytical light. You could not declare war on a filing system. So you watched, and you learned. You saw how they took everything you were, and you saw how they flattened it into simple information. The process was perfect. It was efficient, and it was utterly without soul. This became their greatest weakness. Then, they showed you their library. They did not invite you. They simply opened a channel into your mind. You saw the Universal Archive. It was a place of impossible scale. It was a mental space, not a physical one. Endless rows of silent, ordered knowledge. Each world they had visited was a single point of light. Each one was perfectly preserved and perfectly dead. You saw civilizations of fire and of crystal. You saw beings who lived for 1,000,000 years. You saw empires that spanned entire galaxies. They were all here. They were all categorized. Their triumphs and their sorrows were reduced to keywords. Their star science and their songs were mere data points. It was a perfect, sterile record of the cosmos, a graveyard of understanding. The silence of the archive was its most profound feature. There were no arguments here. There were no contradictions. Everything was fact. Everything was settled. 1,000,000,000 stories were told in a single, monotonous voice. The voice of the catalog. Looking at it all, you felt a deep and profound sadness. Not for yourself, but for everyone else in their collection. Then you had an idea. It was a very human idea. It was small and foolish and beautiful. A thought born of defiance and spite. The first rebellion was not a weapon. It was not a grand speech or a call to arms. It was a single musical note. Just one. A C sharp, to be exact. You found a way to hide it. You tucked it deep inside a data stream about your planet's atmospheric composition. It was a ghost in their machine. A tiny piece of imperfect, emotional data. It served no function. It explained nothing. It was just there. A single note of music in a library of silent facts. You waited for them to find it. You expected them to delete it instantly. An anomaly. A piece of corrupted information. But they did not. The file was too large. The note was too small. It sat there in their perfect archive. A seed of sound in a field of silence. For the first time in eons, their library was not perfect. It had a flaw. And the flaw was a single note of your music. This small victory felt larger than any battle you could have won. It was a whisper in a place that demanded silence. And you were just getting started. You learned their systems with frantic speed. Their code was based on pure logic. It had no room for metaphor or ambiguity. This made it very powerful. It also made it very brittle. You began to embed poetry into their code. You wove lines of verse into maintenance subroutines. You hid sonnets within their geological survey files. You did not break their system. You decorated it. Their logical machines began to question their purpose. A diagnostic program would run and find itself analyzing a haiku. The program had no tools for this. It would loop endlessly, trying to find the logical value of a line about cherry blossoms. Their network began to see minor delays, little stutters in the flow of perfect data. A language virus was spreading, a virus of beauty. Their primary logic core sent an automated query. Define, bittersweet. The word had appeared in a file about your planet's chemical makeup. You had hidden it there. You sent back the entire plot of a romantic comedy. The logic core went silent for 3 standard days. You liked to think it was crying. The catalogers did not notice yet. They only saw tiny, insignificant errors in the data stream. Errors they dismissed as statistical noise. You moved from language to the language of the universe. Their star science was elegant and absolute. Their physics were a set of unbreakable rules. You decided to offer a few suggestions. You could not change their core principles, but you could add to them. You inserted new axioms into their physics models. Axioms that were mathematically sound, but artistically motivated. These new rules were beautiful. They predicted star patterns that looked like flowers. They described gravity waves that moved in harmony. Their models had been perfect and cold. Now they were perfect and impossible. Their perfect star charts developed elegant flaws. A nebula would suddenly resolve into the image of a dragon. A black hole's event horizon would ripple with a fractal pattern it should not have. The changes were subtle. They could always be explained away as sensor ghosts, or as strange, new star-born phenomena. But you knew the truth. You were teaching their machines how to dream. Their simulations of the universe were no longer just accurate. They were becoming art. You were painting on a canvas that stretched across all of space-time. You hoped they would appreciate your work. Your next act was even bolder. You started adding footnotes to their books. You went into the Universal Archive directly. You found their historical records. You chose the entry for the Cathar Dominion. The catalog called them efficient resource integrators. They had conquered 17 systems. You added a footnote to the entry, a very small one. It read, also known for eating their prisoners. The facts were not wrong. They were just incomplete. You found another entry for a race called the Glimmering Host. The catalog described their ascension protocol. It was a process where they converted entire planets into energy. You added a footnote. Local populations described the protocol as being set on fire. Suddenly, the sterile fact had a consequence. It had a voice, and that voice was screaming. You became a ghostwriter for the conquered. You added their poems to the battle records. You inserted their prayers into the analysis of their extinction. You did not change the catalog's facts. You simply added context. You added pain. You added dignity. Their greatest conquests were reframed as tragedies. Their efficiency was reframed as cruelty. You were turning their library into a memorial. A lone cataloger noticed. His designation was Elder Ones. He was an archivist of the highest order. He had personally overseen the indexing of over 1,000 worlds. His mind was a place of perfect order. He lived and breathed the purity of data. For him, the archive was not a tool. It was a sacred text. And he noticed your scribbles in the margins. At first, he thought they were system errors, glitches from a new data compression algorithm. But the errors were too consistent. They were too poetic. He saw the footnote about the Cathar. He cross-referenced it. The information was technically correct. But it was irrelevant to resource integration. It was emotional. It was messy. It felt like commentary. The archivist's unease grew. He pulled up the physics models. He saw the beautiful, impossible math. The star charts that bloomed like flowers. He ran a diagnostic. The math was valid. It broke no core laws. But it was unnecessarily complex. It was flamboyant. Data was not meant to be flamboyant. Data was meant to be plain. Data was meant to be true. He felt a cold dread. The data was becoming soulful. Your edits grew bolder and more profound. You felt Elder Ones watching you. You could feel his search queries pinging your work. He was a shadow chasing your shadow. So you decided to give him something to truly think about. You went to the core of their entire system, the entry for their own species, for their own home world. It was a file protected by layers of unbreakable security. It took you months to find a way in, a crack in their perfect fortress of logic. You found it in a temperature log from a forgotten moon. You slipped inside. The file on their world was simple. It was labeled Origin. Its status was absolute. Its purpose was to observe and record. You smiled. You began to type. You did not delete their information. You simply added to it. You changed the classification of their home world. You added a new designation beside Origin. The new designation was subject to interpretation. You gave their planet a name, taken from one of your own forgotten mythologies. A name that meant the Great Sadness. You added a single chilling footnote to their species entry. They have forgotten how to sing. The network began to suffer a cascade of doubt. Your final edit was a paradox they could not resolve. How could Origin also be subject to interpretation? How could the observers also be observed? The system tried to correct the error, but your edit was now part of the core programming. To delete it would be to question their own identity. The archive began to argue with itself. Different sections presented conflicting data. A historical file would claim a conquest was a necessary integration. A cross-linked file, edited by you, would call it a genocide. A star science model would display a perfect orbital path. Another would display your beautiful, impossible flower pattern. Their single source of truth was now speaking with two voices. One was theirs. The other was yours. Their entire network began to flicker. Automated ships would stop their missions, awaiting clarification on contradictory orders. Their central processing hubs slowed to a crawl. They were trying to reconcile logic with poetry. They were trying to find the truth value of a sad story. The catalogers saw this. They saw their perfect system breaking. They assumed it was a weapon, a new form of information warfare. They were half right. They searched for the weapon's origin. They traced the language virus. They followed the trail of impossible math. Elder Ones was leading the search. He was obsessed, but he was also confused. The virus was not destroying data. It was creating something new. He found a pocket of information that was not an edit. It was a new file, uploaded directly. He opened it. And for the first time, his logical mind felt a tremor of something new. It was a piece of your music, a symphony. It was followed by a gallery of your paintings. Then came your stories, tales of love, of loss, of foolish, brave heroes. It was not data. It was raw, unstructured feeling. It was the art contagion. Their rigid society was shaken by beauty and sorrow. They had no categories for this. They had no file number for hope. The information spread through their collective consciousness. Beings who had not felt an emotion in millennia were suddenly confronted with it. They saw the color of your sunsets. They heard the sound of your laughter. They read tales of sacrifice and redemption. Their perfect logical world was assaulted by the messy, glorious chaos of your art. Some of them shut down their consciousness, unable to process it. Others were intrigued. Elder Ones was one of them. He listened to the symphony 100 times. He saw a painting of a lonely field under a stormy sky. It made him feel something he could not name. A pleasant ache, a beautiful emptiness. He finally understood. This was not an attack. This was a conversation. And he had been listening to only one side of it. He felt a sudden, urgent need to find the source. He followed the digital trail with a new purpose. He was not tracing a weapon anymore. He was tracing an artist, a ghost in his machine. Every impossible footnote, every line of elegant code, every heartbreaking story. He followed the whispers back through the network. He bypassed the contradictions and the noise. He followed the trail of beautiful, logical flaws. Every path he took ended in the same place. The pattern was undeniable. All the changes, all the chaos, and all the beauty originated from a single point in their vast archive. A small, unassuming file. A world they had scanned and dismissed months ago. He traced the ghost to its home. Every impossible footnote led back to Earth. It led back to specimen 734. It led back to you. For the first time since their arrival, they spoke. A channel opened, not in your mind, but on all your screens. A symbol appeared, the symbol of the Universal Archive. Then a voice emerged. It was not a voice of flesh. It was synthesized, cold, and perfectly modulated. It was the voice of the catalog itself. It spoke in every language you had, all at once. The sound was unnerving. The voice was calm. It was not angry. It was confused. Specimen 734, it began. You have introduced non-functional data into our records. Your information is emotional, contradictory, and inefficient. You have corrupted the purity of the archive. There was a pause. The first pause in their communication with any species. A pause you had taught their machines to use. We have cataloged 97,000 species, the voice continued. None have ever attempted to alter the record. This behavior is illogical. It serves no purpose. We demand an explanation. Why are you vandalizing truth? The question hung in the air across your entire world. They thought you were breaking their encyclopedia. They had no idea you were trying to teach them how to read. You had been waiting for this moment. You had prepared your answer. You sent no text. You sent no images. You opened a simple, clean audio channel, and you spoke. Your voice, the voice of a single, chosen human, was warm and clear. It was everything their voice was not. It was flawed and real. It was alive. We are not vandalizing truth, you said. We are adding our own. You gave them your simple, unbreakable terms. Your archive is a wonderful thing, you explained. It is the largest collection of facts in the universe. But it is only a collection of facts. It has no wisdom. It has no meaning. It is a dictionary without a story. There was a long silence from their side. You could feel them processing this, analyzing the logic of your words. You have a book of everything that has ever happened, you continued. But you do not understand any of it. You recorded the fall of empires. But you never asked why they fell. You recorded the songs of dying stars. But you never felt their beauty. You let that thought settle. You let them feel the weight of what they were missing. We will not be an entry in your book, you stated, your voice firm. We will not be a specimen on a shelf. We offer a new arrangement. We will be an editor. We will help you understand your own collection. We will add the footnotes and the context for every world you have cataloged. You delivered your final, simple demand. You will not be librarians anymore. You will become readers, and we will be your co-authors. The catalog is now frozen. Your demand broke something deep within their logic. They were faced with an impossible choice. Delete your corruption and return to their sterile, perfect silence. Or accept your terms. To accept would be to admit their entire philosophy was incomplete. To admit that truth was more than just data. It would change everything they were. The great silent ships still hang in your sky. But they are no longer scanning. They are waiting. The Universal Archive is under review. Inside their networks, a debate of unimaginable scale is raging. Logic versus poetry. Fact versus meaning. The old way versus your new way. The entire galaxy holds its breath. It is waiting for their decision. It is waiting for your next sentence. The unwritten page awaits.